Hey everybody, this is Khara Brindle. Welcome to another video. I have a special guest with us. I have Vicki with us today, who is a colleague. Hey Vicki, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. Thanks for being here. So I asked Vicki to come on this video very intentionally because she shared a personal story, a professional story on social media that had a lot of traction. And it was really about like making a big pivotal change in your practice, which viewers of this channel know I love pivots, so I'm all about it. But do you want to start by introducing who you are and who you serve right now before we talk about that pivot, Vicki?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Vicki Smith. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a psychotherapist, LPC. I've been in private practice for 20 years, which, whew, when I started adding that up, I was like, dang.
Right?
And I currently work with adults, and my specialty is people pleasing and perfectionism.
How interesting for this pivot to happen with that.
Oh, yes.
You're my people more than I realize. So Vicki and I have only talked once to get this scheduled, really. So I'm hearing her full story alongside all of the viewers in the channel. So talk to us about there was something that you decided and then you had to put it in motion. So let's talk about realizing that you needed to make a change. Let's start there.
Yes, well, realizing I need to make a change, or I needed to make a change happened, I would say probably the beginning of 2019.
Ah,
And it was based on some family tragedy, kind of. I use that word, but my sister had a really serious automobile accident. And from that, she found out she had a brain tumor.
oh my
And they
gosh.
did, scans to see everything that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my entire family lives in another state, so getting that phone call and then having to scramble and do the travel to get there, not really knowing what I was going to find was difficult. But I also have an elderly mother who my father passed away um, in about 5 or so years before that. So I had an elderly mother who was living alone. And pretty soon after my sister was diagnosed, she fell. And we believe at this point she had a mini stroke. So she was having issues. My sister was, of course, going through a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
as much as I love my family, we have interesting family dynamics.
Don't we
So,
all?
yes, yes, go figure. So being kind of put into the mix of a family dynamic and a heightened, lots of intense emotion and everybody, really just digging into their family role and
Mhm.
job. Um, I came away at the end of 2019 feeling pretty tired, feeling pretty activated and internally with my own parts. I do internal family systems work. So
Love it.
um,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So I think that just set me in motion to start really looking to see how I could kind of quote unquote take care of myself
Sure.
in the midst of feeling really tired at the end of that year. And of course, we know what happened just a handful of months later. So
Right. That probably
didn't
didn't
really get a
help.
chance to do that
Yeah.
self care like I wanted.
So what I appreciate about your story so far for people who are our colleagues who are listening to this, it's like this was a process. This wasn't a like I had a thought, I put it in motion the next week. Like this was something you had to sit with from what you're saying and like really figure out what would be that shift that needed to happen. Like I mean, it's kind of like the stages of change, right? Of like first we have to know that
Yes.
there's something that needs to happen, and then we have to be like, what's the preparation before the action?
Mhm. Yes,
So that
exactly.
resonates a lot. Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously you sat with that, you got through the pandemic. A lot of us white knuckled through that experience. And then something happened
Yes.
more recently where that you were like, all right, now I have kind of that action plan.
Yeah, the action plan definitely came the end of last year. So it's been
Mm.
about a year. Um, I don't know about you, but around October, I get a little itchy scratchy as a people pleaser and a perfectionist, even though I am, doing my work to manage those waves. I have a tendency to get tired by fall and kind of feel like um, overextended myself, no matter
Mm-hmm.
how much I've been working on keeping that in check. So, uh, 2020 was hard, 2021 was difficult. And I think by the time I got into 2022, I already knew that I was moving into coaching versus therapy. I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to transfer my skills to something that felt, in my mind, a little less emotionally intense. I know that doesn't always mean, that coaching clients are, ready to go, but I was over the pandemic, I knew that I needed to shift something because it really was white knuckling.
Yeah.
I mean, I would lay on the floor after I was done with my clients and just put my feet up on the couch and listen to a meditation and cry. It was just one of those things where I was like, this can't keep going on. Well, little did I know I kept it going on for, almost 2 more years. But last year, I realized that in October, I had started talking to my clinical supervision group that I'm a participant, not a leader, that I was in need of a sabbatical. And
Mm-hmm.
so they pointed out that I had been sprinkling that message throughout the past year. So I realized I've not only been thinking about this, I've been talking about it.
Ah,
And
so they reflected
so
that back to you. Yep.
yes, yes, that was helpful. So last year in October it was the kind of the beginning tipping point of um, starting the process of really putting uh, the walk to the talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you had to think about the process, what were some of the things you had to keep in mind? Because it sounds like, again, very intentional, very like methodical. What did you factor in?
Well, I factored in what that would look like to actually take a sabbatical. Like, could I do it? Would I actually follow through this
Mm,
time? um, because it had always been in the back of my head since the pandemic. And my husband and I were actually driving out of town to go see a concert. So we were doing something fun, and I was not looking forward to it because I was too
mm,
tired. And so that hit me, and I recognized I wasn't really living the life that I wanted to be living. And I had
mm.
just turned 50. So that was swirling, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like midlife, but anyway, you get it. Lots of reflection. And I recognized that I really needed to make, um, in my mind, it was a sweeping change, but I
Mm,
knew that wasn't how my internal world worked. So I was talking to him about the sabbatical, and he said, what I'm worried about is if you take time off, all you'll do is work on building your coaching business and you won't rest.
mm.
And I thought, he has a point. Um,
He knows
and,
you well.
I know, as often as we hate to admit that. Around the time, though, I had this kind of bug in my ear about a particular 6 month coaching container that I was interested in
Mm,
that was I was going to be participating in, and
right.
it included doing a few things that I had been wanting to do for a while, um, travel, adventure, and plant medicine journeys.
Mm,
So I decided instead, to shift what what monies I would not be making if I did a sabbatical to invest in this program.
mm-hmm.
And so it would be starting the beginning of 2023. And I thought, okay, there's something happening, right? Like, I have made a commitment. I have decided
Mm-hmm.
to move in a certain direction. And so that was that was a big step. That was part of the process. It was actually making a decision to do something different instead of just talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I know for most of the folks, when they saw your story on social media, it was really some curiosity about how you notified clients, and you were in the midst of that. And I'm catching you here at the first wave
Mhm.
of notification. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Mhm.
Because I know people, as they like admire the idea of the sabbatical, because that feels so relatable in the burnout journey that a lot of us have. the biggest fear is, how will the clients react? Am I abandoning my clients? What will they think? What if they're upset? I would love your thoughts on how this has looked in particular for you, because you've just put it in motion.
Yes. Well, going through that container, that coaching container, and doing some of those journeys really allowed me to trust what I was hearing inside. And that
Mhm.
was, it was time to move on. It was time um, to make a big change. And I could do it in the way that I felt worked for me. So here I am, 10 months into the year, um, and finally started talking to clients. So it still took me a long time to process with my supervision group and things like that. But
Sure.
I really started going ahead and kind of thinking through it, and determining who I felt I could share that information with first, and who might be able to work through it a little bit easier, so I could kind of practice listening to myself, practice talking with clients. So I
Mhm.
started working with the folks that do monthly check-ins, and sometimes just kind of pop in randomly throughout the year, that I knew could hold the space for themselves between the times that we met.
Right.
And yeah, I let them know that I was going to be making some changes, and this is what it was going to look like, and this was the time frame, and that we would have 90 days to process out or do whatever we needed to do if they wanted to bump up their sessions, knowing that.
Mhm.
um, and it landed well. It landed well for the first two or three folks that were in those time frames of checking in monthly, and so I felt more comfortable in my own skin about, yeah, this is what's best for me. And actually having conversations, many little 5-10 minutes here where they would process things as they moved out,
Yeah.
and hearing myself share with them, it really felt, I was excited, I was ready, I was moving towards my new adventure. And so that validated for myself that I was on the right track. And so now I've shared with a few other folks that come in more frequently.
Mhm.
And last week was pretty nerve-wracking for me. I think it was under the surface,
Mhm.
and yet by the end of the week last week, I was exhausted. I was
I bet.
mentally exhausted and physically
Oh,
exhausted, emotionally too, right? And so the anticipation was, of course, far worse than how anything landed. And I prepped my clients with an email so that they could kind of have that initial reaction, and then come and let me know how it landed for them. So,
sure.
uh,
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm moving into this week knowing that our follow-up sessions for this next group of folks is going to be a lot um, different,
Mhm.
than my
It's in
monthly
motion.
or just pop in for tune-up folks. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I know when we talked on the phone, I had shared I had a similar process to you of like what it looked like to put this in motion. And so I want to share that with viewers too, because most people don't know what it looked like. And I just love that you were willing to talk about your process, knowing that there's so many different ways this can go. And so for me, unfortunately, I wasn't coming from a place of excitement of change. It was the burnout again, which is so
Yeah.
common. Like my throat gets, excuse me, my throat gets all choked up over it. But
Yes.
coming into what I call my I've been in burnout 1.5 times is what I tell colleagues here in
Right.
Colorado. Like that halftime was white knuckling through the pandemic, hit early 2021 and said, okay, I see the symptoms showing up again. I see the health stuff showing up again. It's not great. And so similar to you, I had to like kind of, at least I think I heard this from you, of like look at my caseload and say like, who's first? Who am I notifying first, second, third? Are they coming in waves for our own emotional capacity to have the
Yes,
conversation
exactly.
three
That's
times
it.
in a day or whatever?
Yeah.
Um, and at that point, I picked to reduce my trauma caseload and say I'm going to move 10 clients of mine and make that very
Yeah.
intentional. So I had about a 90-day runway also, where it was like, okay, we have
Yes.
90 days to do warm handoffs, find the right referrals, process all the emotions. I didn't give them an email heads up. I just kind of brought it into the room. And I can see it going either way, where it would be like, oh, it'd be helpful
Yes.
for them to have a reaction before, but then I felt like it was really therapeutic for them to show tears or
Yes.
sadness or anger or just confusion.
Hmm.
And I had to say, like, this is my health. This is why I'm doing this. Like, I need to take away trauma for a while. I need to like put this over
Yes.
here. And I had to convey it with enough certainty that they didn't think they could stay as just a client doing some
Yes.
other kind of work, if that makes
Yes.
sense. Because one of them tried. She's like, okay, I won't do trauma with you. I just want to stay with you. And I'm like, I actually just need like a
Right.
clean break. And so
Hmm.
just watching that like spectrum of emotions for them was a lot.
Hmm.
So when you say you retired, I totally resonate with that because I felt like I had run a marathon, but then it was like this like slow plod of like 90 days to get that final person off the caseload in a very thoughtful, intentional way. And then this
Yes.
lightness showed up. And so I'm excited to hear how this
Yes.
all goes for you down the road of like, do you actually like feel your shoulders come back up instead of, the weight of it all? But yeah, so long story short for viewers, like there's no one right way to do this, but Vicky's way and my way are similar in the sense of like we try to give clients enough space to like process what's going on. Some clients will have a lot of questions, I imagine. Others might be like, no questions, I'm out tomorrow. Like I imagine
I
some of your clients
know.
aren't wanting 90 days. They're just like, I'm going to go now, which
I
is
know.
not expected.
Yes. Yes. The few monthly folks were like, let's just meet next month and wrap things up then. And I thought, you're leaving. There's also waves for us, right? Where
Mhm.
even if we're saying like my health comes first, which by the way, demonstrating that for clients, it might it might not register for some of them, but in some ways there are folks that are in that contemplation state of change for so long that when they witness us share with them the decision, they weren't privy to all of the background, but they could ask about it depending on how we want to use it therapeutically.
Right.
um, it it really motivated. I know one person,
Mm.
and we talked about that. So, and that was one of my just sort of pop in for tune up, hurt people.
Yeah.
And I let her know. I said, if it's okay, I'm gonna make a note on my calendar to follow back up in about 60 days and just see where you are with this because there's some readiness in you, and see if it's kept going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. They surprise us that way, right? Or they're like, when some people we thought would be super upset. As you share that, Vicki, I had a client pop in my head. So I had 10 clients that this was my process of like 10 of them. I
yes.
moved on to other folks. And one of them was a young adult who'd been with me since she was 14 or 15 years old. And at this point, she
Right.
was early 20s. And I thought she would have had a bigger reaction, but her reaction was like, okay, Khara, I'm okay with this. And I was like, I had to like use a little bit of like self-disclosure. Like, I did not expect this reaction. And you're like, can you tell me more what's going in your head right now? And she said, well, I've never got to pick my own therapist. I've always had my parents pick my therapist since I was 8 years old. And now I get the opportunity to pick the one that I think I want to work with. And I was like, so happy for her that she could frame it that way. It wasn't abandonment. It wasn't, oh my gosh, I want
Right.
to stay with someone who knows me really well. Like we had great rapport, but she framed it as I get a chance to try somebody else on and see what I think and have that choice. And I was so blown away by that reaction. I did not
Right.
ever see that coming.
Right. Good
So
for
that
good for
resilience,
y'all's
right? Of
work
like
too.
they do all sorts of things with that. And then I had
Yeah.
some that, cried every session that we had until the end. So as you named, emotionally draining. And it's a process for folks who are
Mhm.
thinking about it. I know we talked about, we're talking about this now, and we might catch you in another video down the road to see how you're feeling about it. But
Yeah.
since you had the first conversations last week, anything you're noticing today as we're filming about, hey, those first conversations have been done.
Well, I had my own therapy this morning.
That
So
helps.
very timely. And did some internal family systems work and really
Nice.
recognized that it was a memory. There was something that was attached from the past that really um, a younger self, one of my younger parts really was
Mm-hmm.
getting like, oh my God, we're in the same space again. And so working with that part, what I'm hoping is that as I move forward, that less of that heaviness or holding or whatever I was telling myself that I had to do this past week to make it okay for my clients
Mm-hmm.
to hear this big news, right? Which we just don't know how it will land for folks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel lighter just knowing that I've connected it to an earlier, experience that I had with a younger part. And so, yeah, I don't want to say I'm excited. I don't know what the word is, but I feel about halfway open
Mm-hmm.
to these next 90 days.
Hopeful,
Uh,
maybe. I don't know. I hear it. It's not really exciting, but it's like curious, maybe, of what the next
yes.
chunk of time will look like.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, there's it's just so relatable of just the process. And I love that you're modeling, and this is why I'm so grateful for you to come on this channel to talk about it. Is like I want people to know that they can make these pivots without hitting burnout, without being
Oh,
like,
please.
hey,
Yes.
this is for a negative quote unquote reason. Like if something's not sitting or we've outgrown something, that's how I frame it. We've outgrown a part of what we do. A pivot is possible and it's not a failure. But I think for a lot of us, we have to be ill or literally put ourselves into some sickness place to then justify the change to not let the clients down. And I don't think that's the only thing here. I've seen a couple colleagues do sabbaticals, which is what you were thinking about when this first started. And some of it was for burnout, but I think I would love for colleagues to also go on a sabbatical just because they just want to change things up or gain some perspective, not because they're in some sort of burnout hole.
I, yes, if I had to go back and do it, I would probably do it about a year sooner,
Mm,
because of what you're saying is just the permission that you can give yourself to hear that something is not a fit anymore and to not override it for the benefit of the service work we do.
right.
Um, and it's not even just so that we can be more resourced and help our clients more. It really is like this is all for me, right? And I did have to factor in what my clients would do with the information, and I am going to be
Mhm.
very intentional about helping them, find the best fit that I can, to continue their work.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
this is about me. And when I finally got okay with that, I think that's when the pivot was a little bit like, no, duh. Yeah. So I
A
love
little
that
more
you have
clear.
experimented with pivots a lot sooner than I did because I don't know what I was telling myself I had to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's where everyone's process is going to look different. And we all have these such negative things we say to ourselves, right? So, as we're
Mhm.
kind of wrapping up this video, I'm curious what advice you have for colleagues who are like, I'm in the same spot. I'm resonating with this video. I have my own journey I'm about to, embark upon when it comes to the clients and what they want to do in their pivot. Or are there a couple
Mhm.
things that pop in your mind that might help them?
I would say if it's of resonance to you, do some body work,
Mhm.
spend some time actually picking up the signals that your body is giving you. I think I've been pretty tired for about 3 years,
Mhm.
and I'm ready to feel what it feels like to not be this tired. And the next thing is admitting when you hear something, admitting that it has some oomph to it. It has something that needs to be respected. Um, so slowing down to listen, but
Mhm.
also once you hear something, bring in your colleagues and start letting them know, like, this is pinging for me right now. You know, can I spend some time talking about it?
Mhm. Yeah. And that
Get some of their own
vulnerability.
individual supervision or something. But then I would say move on it, right? Like you don't have to circle it so much because when you get the signal, and then you let the signal fade, it either has to get louder or it takes you longer to find it again. And so there's a little bit of slowing down to tune in, but then there's a little bit of, okay, let's put our shoes on and get outside and do, get some traction under this, because
Mm-hmm.
we can ruminate and hang out in the not decision making mode
Right. Like
for
analysis
the benefit that
paralysis.
we think for others.
Yeah, no, as you say that, I'm noticing I'm just feeling really grateful for the colleagues I have that are usually in a lot of
Yes.
these videos, because they're the ones I would go to saying, hey, I need something to shift. And having someone in our profession hold that for us is so important, right? Of like, who can we be vulnerable with, completely transparent, no judgment. Hey, I'm feeling burnt out. Hey, I'm not feeling alive in this work anymore. Hey, I'm feeling kind of numb or tired or whatever that looks like. I think that's such an important part of this, is to talk about it. So I know you did that, and you're saying, and have some movement around it because you're talking to people. That might be part of the
Yes.
puzzle.
Yeah. Don't just stay in the intellectual processing of it. Please, please, I beg you.
Yeah. Well, if
And
this
if you need
video
someone
served
to
any
remind
purpose,
you,
yeah, if this served any purpose, it's here are two stories of, hey, we've done it, or you're in the midst of doing it, and it's gonna be okay. Because some of us have done it just behind the scenes, just never talked about it until we had to,
right.
which is like, hey, I'm not taking those referrals, or nope, I don't have a therapy practice, I have a coaching practice, or whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
So obviously viewers might want to hear more about your journey a little further into the 90-day span if you're open to coming back on this channel and doing another video. But any last
Yeah.
thoughts for viewers at this stage of where you're at?
Um, it's scary. It's scary to actually do the thing that you said you were going to do, but it also creates an enormous amount of self trust that um, this is my journey and this is the next right thing for me. So it's not necessarily feel the fear and do it anyway, because I don't really like that, but it is put your arm around your fear and whatever parts of you are doing, teeth chattering and shaking in their boots, and say, we might only take one step today, but we're going to take a step and let's keep going. And yeah, if you can find support somewhere, if that's a meditation practice, colleagues, anything that just helps kind of go, whoop, okay, we're here, we're not on top of the hill anymore. We're moving and we're going. So
Yeah, love that.
yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, I hope we get a chance to hear more about your journey in a few more months, or at
Yeah.
least another 30-day span, it sounds like, of your 90-day
Yes.
commitment.
Yes.
But I really appreciate you sharing your story, Vicki. And I know colleagues are going to find this inspiring as they just try and figure out what they want when it comes to the word sabbatical or pivot or needing a change in their practice in some way. So thank you so much for,
Yes.
being able to talk about it and make that out in the open, right? To say this is possible, and it's scary, but it's worth it. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me. I am definitely loving talking about it because it's right where I am. So thanks for
I know I
catching
caught you
me in the
like in the thick
spot.
of it. Exactly. Well, thank you again. So viewers, stay tuned. We'll hopefully catch Vicki as she's further along in her process. But feel free to put in the comments some of your thoughts about sabbaticals or pivots in the practice. I know Vicki already shared her story on social media, and lots of people had thoughts and questions. So I imagine that will be the case here as well. Until then, we'll see you next time.